The wounded Jem'Hadar soldier, guts pummeled by shrapnel, whimpered in the rubble of the smashed alien city he once called home. Human boots crunched on concrete nearby. "Movement!" Joshua hissed to his team. "Weapons ready!" He flipped off the safety of his plasma carbine. A strained, wheezing breath came from under a collapsed slab. Joshua peeked under with his helmet lamp. There was the Jem'Hadar, shredded armor, sealed under tons of rubble, bleeding to death. Requesting permission to finish this one off. But as Joshua stared into the Jem'Hadar's eyes, he saw something he'd never seen before in this brutal, genocidal species. Fear, helplessness. The Jem'Hadar's legs were crushed, his weapon out of reach. He was totally at the human's mercy. His life was in Joshua's hands. "Sir," came the voice of Joshua's second, waiting for the kill order they all expected. Joshua swallowed. He thought back to all the friends he'd lost to the Jem'Hadar, the colonies glassed from orbit, the videos of sobbing human prisoners begging for mercy before summary execution. The Jem'Hadar didn't take prisoners. They didn't show mercy. "No," Joshua rasped. "We're getting him out now." "What? Sir, that's a Jem'Hadar. They're literally engineered to kill us. Intel says they're more like organic killbots than people. He'll slit our throats the second we free him." Joshua flicked his helmet lamp, illuminating his own eyes so the Jem'Hadar could see them. "I know, but look at him. He's not trying to kill us now. He's scared shitless. He doesn't want to die like this." Joshua raised his voice. "Listen up. I know Command says no prisoners, but they also say we hold ourselves to a higher standard. That even if the Jem'Hadar are soulless killing machines, we're not. We're better than that. Now you've got two options. Help me save this bastard's life or shoot me in the back while I do it myself. What's it going to be?" If they just executed the helpless Jem'Hadar, they'd be no better than the cruel alien invaders that slaughtered humans like animals. The moral fabric of the UPA itself was at stake, and as Joshua and his team struggled to shift the massive rubble and save their hated enemy, none of them knew the incredible chain of events they were about to set in motion. A chain of events that would change not only the Jem'Hadar soldier called Tyro, but the course of the entire war. With Tyro's condition stabilized but still critical, Joshua and his squad set out through the hostile, war-torn alien landscape back toward their extraction point. Joshua, Mike, and the two other soldiers took turns carrying the stretcher, bearing the wounded Jem'Hadar, sidearms drawn with safeties off. They stuck to rubble-strewn alleys to avoid enemy patrols. "All due respect, sir, I still think this is FUBAR," Sergeant Mike Hawkins said, panting from the exertion of hauling Tyro. "He's the enemy. We should have left him." Joshua wiped sweat from his eyes, shifting his grip on the front of the stretcher. "The Jem'Hadar would have left him. That's the difference between us and them. We're not genocidal dicks. The Jem'Hadar are barely people. They're grown in vats to be killing machines. This guy would gut us without a second thought." "Well, he's not gutting anyone now, is he?" Joshua said. "Right now he's a helpless, wounded soldier. I'm not stooping to Dominion tactics." They slogged through the ruined streets until dusk fell. Joshua led them to an abandoned alien factory to make camp. They laid Tyro on the smoothest patch of floor they could find. Joshua set up motion sensors at the entrances, while the squad established a perimeter. Joshua took first watch over Tyro. The Jem'Hadar's eyes fluttered open, fixing Joshua with a hostile glare. Joshua held up his empty hands. "We're not going to hurt you. I'm Joshua. We're getting you to a hospital." "Why?" Tyro rasped. "Why save me?" Joshua shrugged. "It was the right thing to do. What's your name?" "Tyro Yukan," he growled reluctantly. "I thought Jem'Hadar were all the same. Follow the founders without question." Tyro scoffed. "A common misperception. We each have our own thoughts. Some of us question." Joshua leaned forward, curiosity piqued. "Question what?" Before Tyro could respond, a shout rang out from the factory entrance. Plasma fire sizzled through the air. A Jem'Hadar patrol was storming in, weapons blazing. "Contact front," Mike yelled. Joshua cursed, mind racing. They had to protect Tyro. But the Jem'Hadar would show no such mercy. It was kill or be killed. Plasma bolts seared past Joshua's helmet as he crouched behind a crumbling wall. His squad was pinned down, trading shots with the Jem'Hadar patrol that had them outgunned and outnumbered. Tyro lay behind him, helpless on the stretcher. "Fall back," Hawkins yelled over the din of battle. "We can't win this." Joshua gritted his teeth. "Negative, we hold the line." He popped up to squeeze off a few shots. "We're not abandoning Tyro." A plasma bolt exploded against their cover, showering them with pulverized concrete. Joshua saw the fear in his squad's eyes, but also the determination. They would follow him to hell and back. "For Earth!" Joshua roared, as he vaulted over the wall and charged forward, blasting away with his rifle. His squad surged after him, a tidal wave of desperate human fury. Tyro watched in amazement as the humans fought like demons to protect him, an enemy soldier. Something stirred within him, an alien feeling. Respect. Loyalty. He gripped his plasma pistol and heaved himself off the stretcher with a grunt of pain. He would fight alongside these brave humans. The battle devolved into a vicious close-quarters melee. Joshua smashed a Jem'Hadar with his rifle butt, then whirled to blast another. Tyro staggered into the fray, his pistol barking. He drilled two of his own kind between the eyes, their bodies crumpling. A strangled cry pierced the chaos. Joshua spun to see Mike clutching his chest, blood pouring between his fingers. A plasma bolt had punched clean through his armor. The sergeant toppled backward. "Mike!" Joshua dove through the crossfire, grabbed Mike's arm, and dragged him behind a pillar. Plasma sizzled all around them. Joshua ripped a med kit from his belt and slapped a trauma patch on Mike's wound. "Stay with me, buddy. That's an order." Joshua rose and laid down, suppressing fire, forced to leave Mike bleeding as he rejoined the desperate battle. Tyro fought at his side, two enemies now brothers in arms. But it wasn't enough. More Jem'Hadar poured in, and ammo was running low. Joshua eyed the canisters of volatile alien chemicals lining the factory walls. A plan formed, a last desperate gamble. "Tyro, grab Mike, get ready to run." As Tyro heaved Mike over his shoulders with a strained snarl, Joshua snatched demo charges from his belt. He armed them, took a deep breath, and hurled the explosive packages at the chemical vats. The charges detonated, the chemicals ignited in a searing flash. A massive fireball erupted, billowing through the factory. "Go!" Joshua bellowed. He laid down covering fire as his remaining squad and Tyro, carrying Mike, sprinted for the exit. The fireball expanded behind them, a blistering wave of heat and force. The shockwave lifted Joshua off his feet. He hit the ground, rolling, scrambled up, and plunged through the doorway just as the inferno consumed the factory. Outside, Joshua and the others ran through the twilight, the factory belching flames and smoke behind them, like the gates of hell. The Jem'Hadar patrol would not be pursuing them. Joshua called a halt, his lungs heaving. He knelt beside Mike, gingerly peeling back the trauma patch. The wound was ugly, but the bleeding had slowed. Mike was pale and shaky, but alive. "You're going to make it," Joshua said hoarsely. "We all are." Tyro met Joshua's eyes, something like respect glinting within. The two soldiers, forged in the crucible of combat, shared a silent nod of understanding. The true face of war had been revealed, the unique bond between those who had endured its horrors together. But the night was far from over. A long, perilous road still lay ahead, with miles of hostile territory between them and safety. Joshua and Tyro would have to rely on each other more than ever, their fates now inextricably intertwined. For in this dark hour the line between friend and foe had blurred, and survival depended on a bond that transcended species or allegiance. Joshua hefted his rifle and nodded to Tyro and his battered squad. "Let's move out, we're getting off this rock." Joshua and his squad trudged through the alien wilderness under the pale, unfamiliar stars. Tyro limped along stoically, his field dressings already seeping red. Mike drifted in and out of consciousness on the stretcher. The team's med kit was running low. Joshua held up a fist. The squad halted, weapons ready. "Supply cache," he said, pointing at a squat structure overgrown with alien foliage. "We need those meds. Tyro, can you tell if it's guarded?" Tyro peered at the cache through the darkness. His eyes widened. "One guard, he's injured, and he's my brother, Ketra. I thought he died cycles ago." Joshua tensed. Another Jem'Hadar could mean another firefight they couldn't afford, but as he studied Tyro's stricken expression, he knew he couldn't just gun Ketra down. "Please," Tyro rasped, "let me speak to him." Joshua hesitated, then nodded. Tyro limped forward, hands raised. "Ketra, it's Tyro." The delirious Jem'Hadar staggered from the shadows, clutching a wound in his side. He blinked in confusion. "Tyro, how—" "I'm with humans now. They saved my life. Put down your weapon. They won't hurt you." Ketra shook his head groggily. "The Founders, obey the Founders." "The Founders left us to die," Tyro said. "These humans didn't. Please, brother." Slowly, Ketra lowered his plasma rifle. Joshua and the squad advanced cautiously. Tyro knelt beside his brother. "His wounds are grave. He needs the supplies in that cache." Joshua chewed his lip. Another Jem'Hadar would slow them down, put them all at risk. But he thought of Tyro fighting at his side in the factory, Mike bleeding out on the stretcher. What was the point if they abandoned their principles to survive? "Patch him up," Joshua said at last. "We're not leaving him." As Tyro tended to Ketra, Joshua's squad raided the supply cache, stuffing medkits and rations into their packs. Joshua stood watch, his mind whirling. First Tyro, now Ketra. Twice he'd shown mercy to the enemy. What did that make him? A sentimental fool jeopardizing the mission? Or a man fighting to hold on to his humanity in an inhuman war? There were no easy answers. But Joshua knew one thing. If humans and Jem'Hadar kept seeing each other as faceless enemies, the slaughter would never end. Bridging that gap was the only way to stop the bloodshed. "He's stable enough to move," Tyro called. Joshua turned to his squad. "Help him up. We're Oscar Mike." They set off once more, 2 Jem'Hadar now in tow. Joshua fell in beside Tyro and Ketra. "Tell me about life in the Dominion." And as the strange band of allies marched through the night, an understanding began to take root, the seeds of a bond that could transform foes to friends. Joshua and his ragtag squad, now including the 2 Jem'Hadar soldiers Tyro and Ketra, trudged on through the harsh alien landscape. The sun beat down, the air shimmering with heat. Sweat soaked their uniforms. Mike drifted in and out of consciousness on the stretcher, his breathing shallow. "He's not going to make it much longer without real medical attention," Joshua said, giving Mike some water. "We need to find shelter, supplies." Tyro pointed to a cluster of structures in the distance, barely visible through the haze. "There. Could be a settlement, an outpost maybe." Joshua squinted, hope and apprehension warring within him. He signaled the squad forward, weapons ready. As they approached, they saw it was a compound of prefab buildings, ringed by a high fence. A rusted sign hung askew. Biological Research Facility Theta. Joshua frowned. Why would the UPA have a hidden research base out here? He pushed aside his unease. Mike needed help now. They advanced cautiously, cutting through the perimeter fence. The compound was strangely deserted, an eerie silence hanging over the dilapidated structures. They entered the main building, the door creaking open to reveal a darkened interior. Shattered equipment littered the floor. Scorch marks marred the walls. Papers were strewn everywhere. It was clear a battle had raged here. They picked their way through the debris to what had once been a medical bay, scavenging bandages and medication with trembling hands. A console flickered to life as they searched, bathing the room in ghostly light. Joshua tapped the keys, bringing up a corrupted video log. A haggard man in a bloodied lab coat appeared, the timestamp from 2 months ago. "Research log Dr. Amir Singh," he said, his voice shaking. "The Jem'Hadar specimens, they broke containment. We couldn't control them. The serum, It didn't kill them, it just made them more aggressive. They've already slaughtered half my team. Oh God, the things we did to them. Joshua's blood ran cold. He met Tyro's eyes, saw the dawning horror there. As the video crackled out, Joshua searched the database, a nauseous knot growing in his gut. What he found turned his horror to outrage. Detailed files on Jem'Hadar experimentation, autopsies, biological weapons trials. The UPA wasn't just fighting the Jem'Hadar. They were trying to exterminate them. They tortured our people, Tyro snarled. Used them like lab rats to create new ways to kill us. You humans are no different than... No, Joshua snapped. This is not what we stand for. I didn't know, I swear it. The UPA I fight for is better than this. Tyro and Ketra glared at him with hatred, betrayal, disgust. But there was conflict there too, an unwilling recognition of the bond they'd forged. Joshua had to salvage this. What they did here is unforgivable, he said, but it's not all of us. Just like you and Ketra are different than the Jem'Hadar who butcher humans. We're all more than our species, our sides. Please, don't let this poison what we've built. Tyro wavered, the rage in his eyes dimming. But before he could respond, plasma fire tore through the room. Soldiers in UPA strike team armor poured in, rifles flashing. Purge the specimens, one barked. No witnesses. Joshua, Tyro, Ketra, and the squad dove for cover, returning fire. The room exploded into chaos, strobing with deadly light. Joshua rolled to one knee, put a burst into a trooper, taking aim at Tyro. Ketra dropped two more with tight shots. They were a maelstrom of unified fury, human and Jem'Hadar moving as one, bound by the need to survive, to protect each other. In that moment, the line between friend and foe was crystal clear. When the last trooper fell, Joshua stood among the bodies, rifle smoking. He glanced to Tyro and Ketra, saw the same grim resolve in their eyes. The truth of this place could not be buried. We destroy it all, Joshua said. The research, this facility, any trace of what happened here, no one can ever use it again. As they rigged the compound with demo charges, Joshua felt the weight of his choices bearing down. But he didn't regret them. Didn't regret saving Tyro, befriending Ketra, standing against this insidious evil. Hard choices had to be made in war. Terrible, costly, soul-staining choices. Joshua would have to live with his, but he knew, deep in his core, that he was still fighting for what was right. The charges set. They gathered Mike and their precious supplies. Then, as the facility erupted into flames behind them, Joshua led his band of brothers, human and Jem'Hadar alike, back out into the wilderness. As the flames of the destroyed research facility receded behind them, Joshua and his weary band pushed on through the alien landscape, the extraction point finally within reach. Pale sunlight glinted off the twisted wreckage of their downed extraction ship. Joshua's heart sank. They were stranded on this god-forsaken rock with no way out. Shit, Mike groaned, clutching his wound. We're screwed. Joshua paced, mind racing. Jem'Hadar forces prowled the area. It was only a matter of time before they were discovered. They needed a way off this planet, fast. His eyes fell on Tyro and Ketra. A desperate gamble formed. Tyro, you know the location of the nearest Jem'Hadar command post? Tyro nodded warily. Why? I need you to contact them. Set up a meeting with their highest-ranking officer. You're joking, Ketra growled. They'll kill us on sight. Not if we come to negotiate a truce. Joshua held up his hands at their disbelieving stares. Look, both our sides want off this rock, and we have evidence that could change the course of the war. It's our only shot. There was a tense silence. Then Tyro spoke into his comm device in the harsh Jem'Hadar language. An hour later, they stood in the skeletal remains of a bombed-out temple neutral ground, weapons holstered but trigger fingers twitching. A dozen Jem'Hadar materialized out of the shadows, led by a towering figure in ornate armor, Virak Kara. Speak quickly, human, he snarled, before I execute you for your insolence. Joshua stepped forward, palms out. With respect, we came to propose an arrangement. Safe passage off-world. In return, we share evidence of a great crime, one that should give us all pause. Virakkara's eyes narrowed. Joshua presented a data drive taken from the facility. Your soldiers, tortured and experimented on to create a Jem'Hadar killing plague. By my people. Virakkara scanned the files, face darkening with fury. But there was doubt there too. And why should this matter to me? Because it proves the folly of this war, Joshua pressed. We're not as different as we believe. There are those on both sides who would commit horrors in the name of victory. But there are also those who dream of peace, of not losing more comrades to this endless bloodshed. Virakkara was silent for a long moment. Joshua saw the weight of too many dead reflected in the battle-hardened alien eyes. I am weary of burying my brothers, the Jem'Hadar said at last. You will have your ship in exchange for a ceasefire so we may discuss terms. Joshua let out a breath. A fragile understanding brokered amidst the ashes of war, a flicker of hope. Plasma fire split the air. Virakkara roared in pain, purple blood spraying from his shoulder. A fresh wave of Jem'Hadar charged into the temple, a frenzied light in their eyes. Traitors, their leader howled. Defilers of the Founder's will. Virakkara ripped his blade free, teeth bared. Fanatics, they cannot accept the war's end. Bolts sizzled by Joshua's head as he dove for cover. He snapped his rifle to his shoulder and returned fire. At his side, Tyro and Ketra fought with grim focus, cutting down their crazed brethren. It was pandemonium, plasma and blood spraying, stone chips flying. Joshua glimpsed Mike crumpled behind a pillar, firing one-handed. Hawkins was down, riddled with holes. Virakkara dueled 3 Jem'Hadar at once, roaring his defiance. Joshua waded into the thick of it, aliens falling before his onslaught. He had to protect the flicker of hope they'd kindled, had to end this battle so the greater war could end. A plasma bolt clipped his helmet, sent him sprawling. His vision swam. A Jem'Hadar loomed over him, pike raised. A blade sprouted from the alien's chest. Tyro kicked the corpse aside, extending a hand. Joshua clasped it, staggering upright. For Earth, the Jem'Hadar said. For victory, Joshua replied. Together they rejoined the fray, Jem'Hadar and human united, fighting for a future where their children wouldn't have to. They fought with renewed strength, the promise of tomorrow burning in their hearts. The last fanatic fell to Virakkara's blade. The Jem'Hadar commander pulled his bloodied sword free, breathing hard. Around them the temple lay thick with bodies. Go, Virakkara said. Before more come, I will have a ship readied. Joshua nodded grimly. Mike slung Hawkins' lifeless form over his shoulders. They gathered their wounded and dead. As they emerged from the temple into the harsh light, a sleek Jem'Hadar ship decloaked before them, the promise of escape, the promise of peace. But as Joshua mounted the ramp, he knew their trials were far from over. They had lit a spark. Now they had to carry it home, nurture it to a flame that could burn away centuries of hatred. The path ahead would be long, it would be treacherous, but he had his brothers beside him, human and Jem'Hadar. And he had hope. Plasma bolts crackled through the air as Joshua, Tyro and Ketra dove for cover behind a crumbling pillar. Beside them, Virakkara snarled, firing back at the attacking rogue Jem'Hadar with ruthless precision. Joshua blasted a rogue soldier who leaned out too far. Tyro and Ketra fought as one, a whirlwind of deadly grace, their shared bond guiding their movements. They were a unit now, the line between human and Jem'Hadar blurred in the crucible of battle. On your left, Tyro barked. Joshua pivoted, dropping a charging rogue. Hawkins stumbled into the fray, one arm hanging limp, the other gripping his rifle. His face was drawn with pain but lit with fierce determination. I thought I benched you, Joshua called over the din. Since when do I listen? Hawkins quipped, nailing a rogue between the eyes. They fought with renewed vigor, drawing strength from each other. The temple floor grew slick with blood and spent casings. A plasma blast seared over Joshua's head, missing by inches. He turned to see Virak Kara staggering, a smoking hole in his chest. The commander had taken the shot meant for him. "No!" Joshua lunged, catching Virak Kara as he collapsed. He cradled the dying Jem'Hadar, the battle raging around them. "Peace!" Virak Kara gasped, pressing a bloody data chip into Joshua's hand. "Weapons facility. Use it. End." His eyes dimmed, his body going slack. Joshua bowed his head, grief and resolve warring within him. He pocketed the chip and surged to his feet, emptying his rifle into the remaining rogues with cold fury. The last rogue fell. An eerie silence descended on the ruined temple. Joshua looked to Tyro and Ketra, then to Hawkins and his battered squad. "We're splitting up," he said. "Hawkins, take the data chip, get it to command." He took a shuddering breath. "The rest of us, we're going after that weapons facility. We're ending this war. For all of us." Hawkins started to protest, but Joshua cut him off. "That's an order, Sergeant. Get our people home." With a final clasp of hands, a final shared look of promise, they parted ways. Joshua, Tyro, and Ketra melted into the shadows, embarking on a mission that could change the fate of the galaxy. As they trekked through the unforgiving alien landscape, Joshua's mind raced. The weight of the lives on his shoulders, the enormity of the task before them, pressed down on him like a physical force. But he thought of Virak Kara's sacrifice, of the chance for peace that had seemed so impossible mere days ago. He thought of the bond he'd forged with Tyro and Ketra, how it had transformed them all. He would see this through, for his squad, for his newfound brothers, for the dream of a future free from endless bloodshed, no matter the cost. Joshua, Tyro, and Ketra crept through the bowels of the Jem'Hadar weapons facility, their stolen armor allowing them to blend in with the enemy soldiers. The air was thick with the acrid stench of chemicals and hot metal. Ketra led the way, his knowledge of Dominion layouts guiding them deeper into the labyrinthine complex. They slipped into a dimly lit laboratory, banks of computers humming along the walls. Joshua pulled a data drive from his pocket and jacked into a terminal, his fingers flying over the keys. "I'm in," he whispered, "downloading schematics now." His blood ran cold as the files flashed across the screen. A doomsday weapon, capable of annihilating entire worlds, the Dominion's answer to their failing war effort, a genocidal last resort. Tyro hissed a warning. Footsteps echoed down the corridor outside. The trio ducked behind a row of server stacks as the door slid open. A haggard group of humans in tattered lab coats stumbled in, prodded at gunpoint by Jem'Hadar guards. Joshua's eyes widened. UPA scientists, taken prisoner, forced to work on the very weapon meant to eradicate their species. As the guards shoved the prisoners toward a workstation, Joshua caught the eye of a fierce-looking woman with a mane of graying hair. Dr. Eliza Novak, her name badge read. Her gaze was proud and defiant, despite the bruises mottling her face. Joshua made a snap decision. He nodded to Tyro and Ketra, gripped his rifle tight. As one, they burst from concealment, opening fire on the startled Jem'Hadar. The guards went down in a tangle of limbs and strangled cries. "We're here to get you out," Joshua said, already working to slice through the scientist's restraints with his combat knife. "I'm Joshua, UPA Marines. These are my friends, Tyro and Ketra." Dr. Novak rubbed her chafed wrists, eyeing the Jem'Hadar warily. "Your friends, they're the enemy." "Not anymore," Tyro said. "The real enemy is those who would drive us to destroy each other. The Founders." Joshua finished freeing the last scientist. "What do you know about this weapon?" Dr. Novak's face darkened. "It's a planet killer, but that's not the worst of it. The Jem'Hadar, they're being controlled. Their aggression, their loyalty to the Founders, it's engineered into their genes." Joshua's gut clenched. "Is there a way to undo it?" "I believe so," Dr. Novak said. "I've been studying their genome, looking for a cure, but I need my research, my lab." A klaxon blared, lights flashing red. "No time," Joshua said. "We'll grab what we can and go." They raced through the halls, alarms wailing, Tyro and Ketra leading the scientists to the hangar, while Joshua laid down covering fire. They were steps from a transport ship when a plasma bolt sizzled past Joshua's ear. The fanatical commander stepped from the shadows, flanked by a dozen soldiers. His eyes blazed with madness and fury. "Heretics," he snarled. "Defilers! You dare betray the Founders?" Joshua slowly lowered his rifle. "The Founders betrayed you. They made you into something you're not. Slaves, not soldiers." The commander sneered. "I am what I was bred to be, a faithful instrument of the Founders' will, as you should be." "You can be more," Joshua pressed. "Dr. Novak found a cure. You can be free." For a split second, doubt flickered in the commander's eyes. Then his face contorted with rage. "I will not be tempted by your lies." He leveled his rifle at Joshua's heart. "If you will not serve, you will die." Joshua dove aside as the commander opened fire. The hangar exploded into chaos, plasma bolts crisscrossing the air. Joshua rolled behind a fuel drum, popping up to snap off shots. "Get to the ship!" he roared to the others. Dr. Novak and the scientists piled aboard the transport. Tyro and Ketra laid down blistering suppressive fire, driving the fanatics back. Joshua sprinted from cover, blasting 2 soldiers off the ramp, and leapt aboard. The ship lurched into the air, thrusters roaring. Joshua sagged against the bulkhead, chest heaving. They'd made it, but their fight was far from over. "Set course for the nearest UPA outpost," he ordered the pilot. "And get me a comlink. I need to contact my team." The image of Sergeant Hawkins crackled to life on the view screen. "Sir, thank God, I thought—" "I'm all right, Mike, we all are. Listen, I need you to get that data chip to command. Now, we found a way to end this war." Mike nodded grimly. "Already done, sir. The peace talks are—" A console beside Joshua chirped an alert. Proximity warning. His blood turned to ice in his veins. "Sir?" Mike asked. "What is it?" Joshua stared at the readout in numb disbelief. A dozen Jem'Hadar ships dropping out of warp, led by the fanatic commander's flagship. "The commander, he's coming for us. He'll never let us reach the Alliance. He'll never let the truth come out." Joshua's mind raced, the weight of the impossible choice before him crashing down like a physical blow. To stop the commander, he'd have to destroy him, obliterate any chance of the Jem'Hadar learning the truth of the Founder's betrayal. But if he failed, the weapon would be unleashed. Billions would die. The war would rage on forever. Joshua looked to Tyro and Ketra, to Dr. Novak and her haggard scientists, to the battered but unbroken soldiers who had followed him to hell and back. He straightened his spine, met Sergeant Hawkins' eyes through the flickering screen. "Mike, if we don't make it back, tell Command we died fighting for what we believed in, for peace." He cut the transmission before Mike could respond, turned to face the oncoming storm, jaw set with iron resolve. One way or another, this ended today. Joshua's mind raced as the Jem'Hadar flagship loomed on the view screen, a swarm of attack ships fanning out around it. He turned to Tyro, Ketra, and Dr. Novak, his face set with grim determination. "We need to split up," he said. "Tyro, Ketra, take Dr. Novak and the prisoners to the rebel base. Continue the research on the genetic cure. It may be our only hope for lasting peace." Tyro shook his head vehemently. "We're not leaving you, Joshua. We started this together. We'll finish it together." Joshua gripped Tyro's shoulder. "This is bigger than us now. The peace talks, the cure, that's the mission. I'll draw the commander away, buy you time to get to safety." Ketra stepped forward, his eyes hard. "And what of you? Will you sacrifice yourself for this?" "If that's what it takes," Joshua said softly. "Promise me you'll see this through, no matter what happens." Tyro clasped Joshua's hand, his expression fierce. "We will, but you have to promise to come back to us. We're brothers now, all of us." Joshua nodded, throat tight. "I promise." As Tyro and Ketra herded Dr. Novak and the prisoners to the escape pods, Joshua laid in a course for a remote planet, little more than a barren rock. He broadcast a taunting message on all frequencies, daring the commander to follow him. The ruse worked. The commander's ship peeled away from the others, rocketing after Joshua's stolen vessel. Joshua guided his ship into the planet's atmosphere, warning alarms blaring as he pushed the engines past their limits. He set down in a jagged canyon, the terrain providing natural cover. As Joshua emerged into the harsh sunlight, hefting a pulse rifle and bandolier of grenades, he couldn't help but feel a thrill of anticipation. This was what he was trained for, what he was born for. He set to work with ruthless efficiency, rigging tripwires and pressure plates, turning the canyon into a kill box. He had just finished camouflaging the last mine when a sonic boom split the sky. The commander's dropship descended like an angry hornet, disgorging a dozen heavily armed Jem'Hadar onto the cracked earth. The commander strode at their head, his eyes burning with zealous fury. "You think you can lure me into a trap, human?" he snarled, his voice boosted by external speakers. "I will relish killing you slowly. Your death will be a warning to all who would defy the Dominion." Joshua thumbed his rifle to full auto, his heart pounding in his ears. The commander was already dead, he just didn't know it yet. A flash of movement at the edge of the canyon caught Joshua's eye. A lone pebble skittered down the rock face. He spun, opening fire. The sand erupted in gouts of molten glass as Jem'Hadar decloaked and fell, their ambush turned back on them. Joshua dove into a roll as plasma stitched the ground behind him. He came up firing, downing 2 more soldiers, but there were too many, pouring over the canyon lip like a deadly tide. Joshua sprinted for his first tripwire. A Jem'Hadar loomed in his path, rifle raised. Joshua dropped to his knees, skidding under the soldier's legs. The Jem'Hadar spun to fire. Joshua's boot lashed out, hooking the tripwire. The world erupted in thunder and flame. The Jem'Hadar vanished in a maelstrom of flying rocks and shrapnel. Joshua was already moving, ducking into the honeycomb of narrow crevices he'd scouted earlier. The commander's furious bellow echoed off the canyon walls. "Fan out! Find him!" Joshua slithered through the cracks, doubling back and watching as soldiers passed mere feet away. He holstered his rifle, drew his combat knife. The first Jem'Hadar died silently, his throat open to the bone. The second managed a strangled gurgle as the blade rammed up under his chin. A plasma bolt seared past Joshua's cheek. He spun, hurling his knife. It buried to the hilt in a Jem'Hadar's eye. Joshua snatched up the fallen soldier's rifle, sending a barrage of fire down the gulch. Jem'Hadar scattered for cover. Joshua vaulted a boulder, landing in their midst. He was a whirlwind of slashing talons and hammering rifle butts, moving faster than thought, trained reflexes and raw instinct fused into something deadly and sublime. He fought like a man possessed, his mind clear, his purpose absolute. For Mike and every soldier who had bled and died under his command, for Tyro and Ketra and the chance to be more than living weapons, for a future where his children wouldn't have to take up arms. The last Jem'Hadar crumpled, and Joshua stood alone, his armor scorched and dented, blood leaking from a dozen wounds. The sound of slow clapping made him turn. The commander emerged from the shadows, a cruel smile on his lips. He had a disruptor cannon braced on his shoulder, its muzzle aimed at Joshua's heart. "Magnificent," he sneered. "You kill with such artistry. You would have made a fine Jem'Hadar." "I'm nothing like you," Joshua spat. The commander laughed. "Oh, but you are. The Dominion has been shaping humanity for generations, orchestrating your petty wars and conflicts, culling the weak, forging you into a weapon to rival the Jem'Hadar. You are the Dominion's greatest triumph." Joshua went cold. The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. The senseless border skirmishes, the UPA's shadowy Black Ops programs, the ease with which the Jem'Hadar had invaded human space. It had all been a game, a twisted grand design. "No," Joshua whispered. "I won't let you control me. I choose my own path." The commander shrugged. "Then you choose death." He squeezed the trigger. Joshua lunged to the side, but the cannon blast caught him in the ribs, hurling him back. Joshua hit the ground hard, his vision swimming. The world seemed to tilt and distort, darkness clawing at the edges. The commander loomed over him, aiming the cannon at his skull. "Pathetic," he growled. "In the end, you're just another weak, mewling human." Joshua looked up at his executor, blood bubbling on his lips. He saw his death in the commander's pitiless eyes. But he also saw something else, a tiny red light blinking on the commander's chest. The pressure mine Joshua had buried at the start of the battle, a last resort he never thought he'd use. Joshua bared his teeth in a rictus grin. "Wrong, I'm the one who beat you." He raised his hand, the detonator clutched in his bloody fist. The commander's eyes widened, he opened his mouth. Joshua pressed the button. Joshua's stolen ship rocketed through the void, Ketra at the helm. Dr. Novak hunched over her research notes, Tyro standing stoic at the viewport. Joshua paced the deck, restless energy thrumming through him. They'd struck a blow against the Dominion, but the war was far from over. The rebel base grew larger on the view screen, a hidden outpost of the resistance. But as they approached, Joshua's heart seized. Smoke poured from shattered structures, plasma fire streaked the air. The base was under attack. "No," Joshua breathed. "We're too late." Ketra brought the ship in hard and fast. They leapt out, weapons ready, into a scene of chaos. Jem'Hadar and human soldiers in UPA tactical gear swarmed the base, led by a severe man with colonel's bars, a traitor working with the Dominion. Joshua and his team carved a path of destruction, fighting to reach the command center. They had to secure Dr. Novak's research, expose the collaborators' treachery. Bullets and plasma bolts filled the air. In the heart of the base, they found a knot of rebels making a desperate last stand, led by a grizzled man named Orion. His eyes widened at the sight of Joshua and Tyro fighting side by side. "Sergeant Dunn, what the hell?" "No time," Joshua shouted over the din. "We have to get the doctor to her lab." They fought their way deeper into the base, rebels falling around them. At the lab, Dr. Novak scrambled to gather her work, hands shaking. Joshua and Ketra held the door, grimly mowing down the approaching soldiers. A guttural cry pierced the mayhem. Joshua turned to see Tyro locked in combat with a trio of snarling Jem'Hadar. "Traitor!" they howled. "Defiler of the Founder's will!" Tyro fought like a man possessed, his face a mask of anguish and determination. But there were too many. He was driven back, blood seeping from a dozen wounds. "Tyro!" Joshua surged toward his friend, but a hail of plasma drove him back. The Jem'Hadar closed in, blades flashing. Tyro's eyes met Joshua's. A moment of perfect understanding passed between them. "Go," Tyro said. "Finish the mission." And then he was lost in a press of bodies, a defiant roar on his lips as he battled his own kind. Tears stinging his eyes, Joshua wrenched himself away. He grabbed Dr. Novak, pulled her after him as they ran for the hangar. Ketra fell in beside them, stone-faced. They burst onto the flight deck. Orion and a handful of survivors were already there, prepping a battered shuttlecraft. "Where's Tyro?" Orion demanded. Joshua couldn't speak. He just shook his head. Orion's face hardened. "Then his sacrifice won't be in vain. Get your asses on that ship." They piled aboard, the shuttle lifting off in a wash of exhaust and plasma fire. As the rebel base dwindled behind them, swarming with enemy forces, Joshua clenched his fists until his nails bit into his palms. "What now?" Dr. Novak asked, her voice hollow. Joshua's jaw tightened. "We blow the lid off this thing. We broadcast the evidence of what the Dominion and their collaborators have done. We make sure the whole damn galaxy knows the truth." He turned to the shuttle's comm station, fingers flying over the controls. He punched in the codes to access the UPA's emergency broadcast channels, the ones hardwired into every ship and colony from here to Earth. Joshua took a deep breath, and then he began to speak, his voice echoing out across the stars. He told of the secret experiments, the Dominion's insidious manipulations, of the traitors within the UPA working to prolong the war for their own twisted ends, of the bonds forged between human and Jem'Hadar, the dream of peace that refused to die. Joshua poured out his heart, laid bare the scars on his soul, and as he spoke he thought of Tyro, of Mike and Hawkins and all the others who had fought and bled and died beside him. This was their legacy. This was how they would be remembered, not as soldiers or enemies, but as beings who had dared to believe in something more. When it was done, Joshua sagged back in his chair, spent. "It's over," Ketra said quietly. "You did it." But as Joshua watched the stars slide by outside the viewport, he knew it was only the beginning. The war might be ending, but the true struggle was just starting. The struggle to heal, to rebuild, to find a way forward in a galaxy torn apart by lies and hatred. It wouldn't be easy. There would be opposition from those invested in the status quo, those unwilling to relinquish their power. But there would also be hope, a fragile, precious thing, kindled in the hearts of those who had heard Joshua's words and dared to believe. Dr. Novak would continue her work, striving to undo the Dominion's dark legacy. Ketra would become an ambassador between their people, a symbol of the bonds they had forged through fire and blood. And Joshua would keep fighting, not with guns and ships, but with words and ideas. He would carry the torch that Tyro and the others had lit, no matter how heavy it grew. For in the end, that was all any of them could do, to keep pushing forward one step at a time, toward a future where children could grow up without the specter of war, where the lines between species and allegiance meant less than the common hopes and dreams that united them. It was a long road, a hard road, but it was the only road worth taking. And as the shuttle carried them out into the waiting stars, Joshua knew he would walk it to the end. No matter the cost. If you finish this story, please subscribe and like the video. Then leave a comment that says, "I like the story," and I will heart every single one of them. It really helps me. Thank you for your time.